Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jen, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Tara Eden, founder of Somatic Movement Project based out of Chiang Mai, Thailand. Hi, Tara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you, and welcome to Curito Connects. So Tara and I met through a mutual friend, Yoni, in Taipei. I think it was back in, was it 2018, 19, I think, pre-pandemic. And that was the only time we met in person, where you came out to Taipei to finish your Feldenkrais course. And for those who are listening who don't know what Feldenkrais method is, in short, it is a kind of neuromuscular re-education that works directly with the nervous system to reduce tension, pain, and anxiety by disrupting self-limiting habits of movement and breathing. It is an amazing therapeutic technique that I think not that many people know of, because I think most people think movement, they think yoga, dance, Pilates. And so I was very excited to learn about Feldenkrais from Tara, actually. And I would recommend to those who are curious and interested with this method to look into it. Tara is a former dancer from Canada who then spent time studying dance movement therapy at the New School in New York City in the early 2000s and is currently residing in Thailand. If you can't tell already from her background, Tara has seen it all, from the arts to corporate to nonprofits to freelancing and moving countries and setting up her new roots. But amidst all of this, what has kept Tara going is her embodied spirituality practice, which I will now pass the mic over to Tara so she can tell us why the term embodied spirituality has had such an impactful presence in her life. You can simmer on my intro if you need.
Well, I think the word spirituality can be a little bit too loaded. So maybe it's something more about an embodied authenticity, which to me is really the same thing.
Okay.
And so, Feldenkrais method is under the umbrella of somatic movement or somatic education. And my impression of it is that at its roots, it's about developing a more whole sense of self. And I think that a whole sense of self is really what we need to kind of show up in our lives in a way that feels balanced and comfortable, and in that way allows our relationships to also be a little bit more balanced and comfortable.
I hope this is not a silly question, but can you elaborate on how that works for those of us who can't really wrap our head around the notion of what does, whole sense of self mean, and how do you find balance by just, the Feldenkrais method or somatic movement, right?
It's a hard thing to talk about because it's experiential. So it's like having someone talk about meditation. Well, you can talk about it until your face is purple, but until you start practicing it, you don't really know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes it's useful to just unpack what somatic means, because I've had people ask me a lot about, what's the difference between somatic movement or yoga, and isn't yoga somatic? And I think yoga can be. I was a yoga teacher, and I used to teach a form of somatic yoga. And the difference, I think, is the nature of your attention. So, for example, when I was a super yogi, I was living and working in Brooklyn, and my yoga practice was extremely important to me, and it was definitely, I considered it some kind of moving meditation. And I was using it to neutralize my anxiety. And yet what was ironic was that when I would do my yoga, it allowed me to separate from my anxiety. So it was kind of like getting high or something. It was like a way of not feeling what I was feeling, escaping from what I was feeling. And so an embodiment practice, a somatic practice, somatic movement is about going into what you feel, which sometimes is definitely not awesome or fun at the beginning, or it's ongoing. But it means that you get a sense of who and how you are, all the parts, not just the parts that you like the most or wish that you had. Whereas yoga or other more cognitive practices can oftentimes be a method of bypassing what you're really authentically experiencing and move you farther away from getting clarity about yourself in that way. Does that make sense?
Fascinating. Yes, it makes sense, and I understand what you meant earlier by one has to really experience it in order to understand the intricacy of the practice. So I'm gonna kind of rewind us a little bit back to the very beginnings of who Tara Eden is. So can you just give us a little summary of like you were born in Canada, your upbringing, and how you got into dancing, and then how that led you to like New York. And you said earlier too that yoga was a big part of your life at the time, and you had some anxiety to work out. And how did all of that then transition you into discovering Feldenkrais method? And what was kind of like the aha moment for you where it sounds like Feldenkrais landed into your life and everything just shifted? In this whole new path for you. So I know that was a loaded question, but if you can kind of like paint a quick picture for us to understand your journey to becoming, a Feldenkrais practitioner and educator.
Well, if the question about becoming a Feldenkrais practitioner, an educator, really comes from, what is this thing about and embodied authenticity, and what, like, why is that valuable? What's that about? What does that mean? I'll start by saying that I had the privilege of growing up in a family that was very supportive of my expression, however that might be. And I think that's truly a privilege. So my mother had studied dance movement therapy herself, and the idea of both connecting to nature and that also being part of a process of connecting deeper to ourselves was already on my radar. And then the expression of movement as part of that also sort of just happened organically. So, it was already very much part of my innate, like part of my natural cloth, let's say, how it was sewn together, right?
Your natural DNA.
Totally, right? So, the progression of things was easier for me. And the sense of needing authenticity in my life probably was a bit ignited because I grew up on an island, in a very small town on an island in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And my family were expats. They'd come from the States. They were kind of part of the draft dodging Vietnam War thing. So we were outcasts. And so it became really almost like a survival to maintain who we were and how we were. So I think that also is part of it. So coupling these things together, it made my path fairly clear in terms of keeping those intentions throughout my life. So by the time I got to New York, I had already decided that I wanted to study dance movement therapy. I got into teaching yoga, and I had this vision of something called the Somatic Movement Project, which was essentially going to be a house, an umbrella, a community of people that were drawn to the same kind of things that I was, that saw the importance in an embodied authenticity, that wanted to be true to themselves. And I think that was really the foundation of it. So I also at that time in New York got into what was called Thai yoga massage, which is kind of I think it was actually created in Chiang Mai, where I am now in Thailand. Mm-hmm. And then there was a school in Canada, in Montreal. And so I started going to that school to learn Thai yoga massage. And it was extremely potent. And then, like I said, because I was in New York and I had this very intense yoga practice because I was very intense. And I was misaligned because I was meeting my internal fire with more fire. And that was not doing anything for my anxiety. And so as I was practicing Thai yoga massage, I kept kind of like moving into something that was deeper. Again, it was like, these words, like words really limit things, but something about a truth, about it, again, like a deeper embodied authenticity, embodied understanding, embodied spirituality, where I was connecting with these other people and I was feeling them. And I was feeling us as humans, as nature, as, an energetic component of just being a human. Right?
Yeah. So could it be comparable to say how plant-based medicine and psychedelics and all that is very in these days? So that kind of experience that they talk about, or having that energetic kind of connection, is that kind of what you were illustrating here, that when you were doing this practice that you really could connect on that energetic level with people who were in the room with you?
I think that's so on point. That's so cool that you bring that up, because in my youth, I had really been into hallucinogenics and then had passed through that time in my life. And now I know there's a resurgence, and it's interesting. I think it can be a really amazing tool. And it also in some ways to me could be a bypassing, if you kind of need an external thing to elicit an experience in yourself, it's not the same as that painstaking process of finding it. And I'm not saying that's easy or even accessible for everybody, but yeah, I think that's quite astute to make that correlation. I think that's essentially the same kind of experience. Yeah.
So based on what you described earlier about your exposure to Thai massage and that experience there, so then what kind of what doors open for you then, right? Because you kind of like, oh wow, this is very powerful, and it's kind of like, and then now what?
So once I started accessing something that I actually had accessed back as a child on the island, running around, dancing around in the forest, we'll call it a spiritual awareness. It coincided with having a teacher. It was actually a couple of teachers that had studied with a spiritual teacher here in Chiang Mai. And I knew that I was not going to be able to get aligned while living in Brooklyn. So I thought it would be a good idea to extricate myself for a while and go to Southeast Asia and learn from this spiritual teacher, and to see if I could kind of bring those parts of myself back into a clearer forefront.
And how long ago was that?
So that was in 2013 that I left New York, and I had saved a bunch of money, and so I didn't have to worry about working for a while. And in that time, I still was determined to bring movement into this project. I still had this vision of the Somatic Movement Project. And while I was working with my teacher and I was tapping into more of myself and gaining that clarity, and of course doing some meditation, I fell upon the Feldenkrais method, and that was in 2014. And I had encountered it earlier in my life, and I had actually been put off by the word Feldenkrais because it sounds, I don't know, kind of like severe. I don't know. It just didn't, even in the context of it being like at a dance studio or a yoga studio, or it would be described as like, this somatic process of connecting to yourself in a deeper way. And I would just be like, but it's called Feldenkrais. That's weird. So I couldn't get past it. I think I'd actually done some in university. But anyway, so there was some YouTube awareness through movement lesson that I found, probably like release your neck and shoulders. And, the lessons are these very simple, slow instructions. It's not movement like you dance all over the room. You're usually laying on your back, chilling. And then you do this series of very unique, pleasant, small movements, and they elicit a brain change. And when I finished the lesson, I was just like, what the fuck was that? It's like, I need to know more about this. So I just got completely obsessed with it and downloaded a lot of audio materials. And I had all the time. So I would just listen to lessons all day, really, until I decided to start the training. And and then the rest is history. Again, I had the luxury of not having kids to take care of or a career to attend to, so I got to really kind of expedite my learning process in Feldenkrais.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, congratulations. It's been 10 years since you left the US. You said 2013,
Yeah,
2023 now.
yeah.
And so that's yeah, we're kind of reflecting on a decade of this journey that you've been on. And it sounds like, I mean, in a way it was kind of like your eat, pray, love, right? Like your eat, pray, love journey, as we call it now, if I may use that terminology, right? Where you where you're like, I need to find my alignment. I'm going to leave the US. And so here I am in Thailand because I really resonated with this Thai guru at the time. But then even that shifted you to Feldenkrais, right? Because you didn't end up just following that particular path. You discovered Feldenkrais and then dived very deeply into that practice. Just out of curiosity, what kind of kept you grounded to remain in Chiang Mai during this time, right? Because I think oftentimes when we pick up and relocate to locations, um, yeah, like how do you or how did you, I guess, stay grounded to be like, okay, I'm going to stay put here versus like, okay, well, I discovered Feldenkrais and I'm going to take the courses. But maybe I want to relocate somewhere else where I don't know where the courses were held at the time, or I don't think online courses were that popular back then in 2014. So not as accessible as it is now, right? Like, I mean, now you want to do any studies, it's like almost in person is a luxury because everything is online now. So yeah, I wanted to throw that out there to kind of have you share your processing during that time, and how you kind of figured out like, I'm gonna take my time to really study this and not worry about maybe how my family was thinking about what I'm doing out here. How do I identify myself when I'm socializing and people are asking, oh, Tara, so what do you do? And these are very legit questions that I think oftentimes when we go through transitions, it's that conversation you have, right? And how do you keep yourself grounded, and how do you really, as we talked about earlier too, be very introspective. And you pointed out many times in this conversation already about your somatic movement project. Like that was your goal. Like, you're like, that's where I want to be at. And all these tools I'm collecting along the way, and I'm sure in many conversations during those years, there are some who got it, there are some who didn't get it. And, so
So you really hit on it there, what you just said. And it's an interesting question. It comes up. I do these mentorships now with either people that are studying Feldenkrais or people that are working in another modality and they want to learn somatic movement or do somatic stuff in their modality. So anyway, I have a lot of students that will come through town, and this topic comes up a lot about making these choices and or a physical move and or setting up a practice and or honing in when you have a lot of ideas and you're trying to figure out which direction to go. And what was absolutely true for me and what I just think is absolutely true is it's all about your intention. There needs to be complete clarity, because when you do know. It is intuition. And I believe that we all have intuition and can tap into it. And I know that a lot of us get deterred, clouded, directly pushed away from our intuition. So again, I think there is a high level of privilege to even learn what the tools are to access it. And yet, if you've come to the place that you're asking yourself that question, then it really is about getting clear of what your intention is. One important part of that is to listen to the feeling that you get when you present yourself with different possibilities. I had a friend that used to talk about, I guess it must be some form of coaching. He used to talk about how he had an imaginary boardroom of like 10 people in his head. And when he had some kind of major life question he was pondering, he would kind of imagine those 10 people and they'd vote, So, I mean, that's a little bit of a silly, cognitive processing. And what I'm talking about is actually a deep embodied sense. But it's the same thing, because you do already know what is right for you. The complications of what is expected of you, what you should do, everyone has their own situation with that, and you got to work through it. But what get clear. What is your absolute intention, right? I ask my students all the time, is your intention to be with people, lots of people? Do you want to be a facilitator? Is that important to you, to be in the role of facilitator? Is it important to you to connect one-on-one intimately with another individual? Is it important to you that you're in a teacher role, that you're imparting information? Is it important to you that you're a guide and you're just pointing things out? These kinds of things are extremely important. And then, so for me personally, in the choices that I made, I knew the lifestyle that I wanted to have. It was very clear to me. I knew that I didn't want to be in an environment that was going to create anxiety. I figured out what my triggers were, and that I wanted to be in an environment that was going to help me feel safe and comfortable and balanced. And I figured out what that entailed. And when I decided to start my private practice, it wasn't easy, it wasn't comfortable, and it was certainly leap of faith after leap of faith. And the leap of faith, again, was just keep coming back to my own intention. And it's miraculous when you're clear, when you know, things take form around you in a very, very potent way.
Wow. So is it fair to say your intention at the time in 2013 when you left New York was to find the alignment and really build up on the Somatic Movement Project? And so along this path and this journey, you really stuck to that, like with that intention, right? And like what you said earlier, when you set up your practice and you chose to set it up in Thailand, was there at any point where you thought that you wanted to set it up elsewhere? Or were you kind of like, well, I'm here and my community is here, so I'm just going to start here and I feel comfortable here? And then I wanted to ask, how did COVID affect what you were building, or what you were working on?
Well, again, our intention isn't the same thing as a vision, like a concrete our intention doesn't need to be a concrete picture of how our life needs to be. It's what's really important to us, right? So, I mean, I had doubts all the time? Of course, I had doubts. I still have doubts. That's part of being a human. Choosing to stay, first of all, it's the privilege. It's the privilege that I have that allows me to stay. And it's the gift of Thailand allowing me to stay, which that privilege could change, however rules change, circumstances change. But again, it's, there wasn't a lot of question about should I be here or not? Do I want to be here or not? Because I was clear. I knew the feeling that I needed to have. So the construct of where and how that looked, that stuff kind of comes after. But to your point, I mean, my intention was I want clarity, and I can't get clear in New York. There's too much shit clogging my brain. I need to go to a place where I can get clarity. So finding Pichette, spending a year and a half with him, the spiritual teacher, was the container I needed to start gaining that clarity. And once you have the clarity and you can feel yourself, you know if what you're doing is the right thing to do or not. You actually just know, but you can't bypass and you can't expedite. It's just a slow process. The analogy I use all the time is it's a garden. You plant a seed. And I had thought for sure that at some point, once my little seed was a little sapling, that I could then take it out of the earth and transport it. And I still might at some point, but for now, what's happening here is definitely aligned and feels right. I forget what the second part of your question was.
No, I think you answered. You answered that question, and I love the building your garden analogy. I think that is there is no what do you call it? Like there's no cheat sheet. There is no fast track. It really is. One has to really have to just dig in there and do the work. Mm-hmm. And it takes time. It really takes time. Mm-hmm. So can you just share with us a little bit like your own practice with embodied authenticity? And you can give examples like just to illustrate like how this works, right? In terms of for you. So I know you mentioned earlier, like intention is very key. So what, like when you, in your day to day or when you have your ups and downs, what kind of keeps you grounded using this embodied authenticity? I want to say mantra, but it's not really mantra, but just, this practice.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that the foundation is self-love. And that can be a very directed practice. It was for me. It was very conscious. It was very deliberate. Because I don't think we can actually trust ourselves until we have a deep sense of self-love. So from the self-trust, then you can start to develop your practice. Because if you haven't gotten through in that way, then again, you might be in kind of a bypassing situation. You have followed a practice someone told you to do, or something that's trendy, or something that's sexy, or something you should do, or whatever. So that being said, for me, awareness through movement lessons are an integral part of my practice. And like most classes that are facilitated by one person that has a voice, probably is important to find a person that resonates with you, right? Just like a yoga class, you need the person that resonates with you. So I have quite a thorough library of awareness through movement lessons and some teachers that I love to listen to. Just, audio lessons. If I have the opportunity, I'll do live lessons on Zoom. I wish to God I could be doing live lessons here in Thailand, but I'm the only working Feldenkrais practitioner in the country for now. although I have a lot of students that have done or are doing their Feldenkrais training, and so I'm hopeful that they'll come and share with us here. But anyway, so yes, first and foremost, awareness through movement practice is amazing for me and for a lot of people, if that is your style. And then because I do those lessons, then I can become autonomous. And this is the really feeds into what you're asking me about grounding and sort of, I think, like a maintenance. And it came up just recently. I took a break over Christmas holiday time and was very wound up online a lot, getting a lot of loose ends together, as we do, ironically, during a break time. And at some point, I didn't even feel like I had the attention span for awareness through movement. I just thought, fuck, I can't get on the floor. I just, I'm thinking about too much stuff. There's too much going on, friends, activities. And so at one point, I started to feel kind of sick. I was getting super misaligned. I wasn't well. And I couldn't get myself to commit to finding that lesson and getting on the floor. The lessons are sometimes, 45 minutes. And that seemed like an ungodly amount of time to calm down and slow down. I couldn't calm down and slow down. So it took me 3 days. And on the third day, I just made some kind of bargain with myself. And what I did, and what I always encourage my students to do, is create a container. I'll use a stopwatch, 10 minutes, so that okay, I get out of jail in 10 minutes, right? 15 minutes, whatever your stopwatch is. And all I did was lay on the floor, and I just started to use the two most potent somatic tools that I know. The first one is gravity, the sense of when you're laying down, the way that you feel yourself making contact with the floor. And then the second tool is breathing, noticing the feeling of your breathing and how it moves. Not a big analysis, not doing anything a particular way. And then what comes of those two tools is the third tool, which is attention, the quality of attention, right? So if you have gravity, breath, and the quality of your attention, the first 5 minutes, I was like, this shit isn't working. It's not going to work. I'm too wound up. I don't feel well. And then, to be fair, I do have a lot of experience at this, so I think I can make this transition a bit faster. But I did. The transition happened, and it's a chemical change. It's a brain change. I call it a state change. I evoked a state change. And once I had a sense again of my humanness, my sense of human meets the earth, sense of I am a human breathing, and made space between all the complexity of all that busy cognitive chaos, and just became a simple human breathing being, then I was grounded again, and then I felt better. And after that, I could do an awareness through movement lesson. I could do other things that were a little bit more in depth, but you really need that first step. And I tell people all the time, it's not complicated. It's not time consuming. Got to do it. But literally anybody can do it. It's a very potent tool. And I do encourage people to try it.
So why have we not heard somatic movement or Feldenkrais method as populated, or as, if I can use the word, commercialized in the market space of wellness and mindfulness, which with COVID and the last decade has exploded as an industry. So I'm just a little bit curious from someone who's a professional in this area, right? Why is it that, if it's so potent and so accessible, as you said, and very helpful and powerful, we don't know about it?
Okay, well, the first reason, it's a wonderful question. So the first reason is that the nature of the modality is not going to have facilitators that are going to be advertising online, right? The nature of what we do is an embodied authenticity. So people like me and my colleagues and people that are interested in the world of somatics, we are not doing a lot of digital work. We are not doing a lot of busy cognitive stuff. We're doing our practice. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of incredibly ironic because we don't want to make it sexy. We don't want to popularize it. We don't want to package it in a way that is attractive to people. We want people to come about it in an organic way. And then, again, what's interesting is since the pandemic, things have changed a lot in our field because we all had to get online. You know, for myself, I started doing Zoom classes, and then I started doing Zoom privates, which actually is one of my favorite things to do. I have a lot of people that I see regularly, weekly, for years now. And I was so resistant at the beginning. I remember before the pandemic, I had a student that was begging me to do sessions with her online. I refused. And then, of course, we had the necessity of it. And then what I realized is that being online is not a disembodied experience on its own. It depends how you use it, right? A telephone is not a disembodied experience other than you aren't there co-regulating with another nervous system in front of you. So if being online is a conduit for communication, then I can be a facilitator. I can observe somebody in their living room laying on the floor with their eyes closed. They can have a totally mind-blowing somatic embodied experience totally authentically, right? So, and now the Feldenkrais world has caught on to that. There's a lot of resources out there. There's astronomically more information and access to Feldenkrais. People do know about it across the States, Australia, England, Germany, Spain, Italy, definitely catching on a lot now. And my sense is that it's going to continue to catch on. And it isn't for everybody. It's not something that you can do without opening yourself up and listening with your whole self. And there's a whole lot of reasons why people can't or don't want to do that. So it's a potent modality for people that are ready to do that kind of work.
Mm. Got it. Well, that's exciting. That's more accessible online now. So it did follow the trend that COVID left us with. Would you say that your vision, when you mentioned to us very early on about your somatic movement project, do you feel like where you are right now, you've achieved that, or you have bigger goals for how you like this to grow? Because when you mentioned something earlier about you're kind of the only practitioner in Chiang Mai right now, I thought to myself, oh, maybe you should just open a school in Chiang Mai. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there for you to see how you feel about again, your intention in this project.
This has been coming up a lot. It's often even talk about when things coalesce. Yes, I am open to supporting people in their learning journey. I can't teach Feldenkrais. I can't do a professional Feldenkrais program. It's a 4-year program, and trainers have 30 years experience. And I mean, it's like a whole, literally a guild, like it's a whole thing. But in terms of somatic movement, yeah, I am open to supporting people in their process. I do a mentorship program now, and have had a few people coming through. One woman I'm working with now, it's been over a year we've been working together. Other people come through for a few months. There's this organization called ISMETA, ISMETA, that certifies people as somatic movement therapists or somatic movement educators. It's an international organization. And because I'm one of the professionals with under that umbrella, uh, people can come and study with me to gather hours toward their certification. So yes, I'm definitely open to that. I mean, I'm not exactly ready to open the school per se, but I am definitely open to working with people on an individual level. Group facilitation. I used to do a lot of group facilitation, and that is not. Uh, that's not my.
It's not your jam.
It's not my jam. It's not my jam. I don't have the right kind of energy for that anymore. It doesn't fulfill me. I could be making a lot more money if I were doing group facilitation, and that would be fun. It's always fun to make more money, but that is definitely not. Um, yeah, it is so deep and rich to work with somebody one on one and to be part of their learning process. And I learned so much from it that it's almost cheapened to be in a group situation. Now that being said, I'm sure a time will come that maybe it won't. I don't know. Maybe my energy will change and I'll find that exciting again. But at this point in my life, no. However, the other direction that I'm starting to go in more is also working with children with special needs. And that probably is worth uh, vocalizing, sending out into the world, because the Feldenkrais work in particular can be an extremely valuable resource for children that are struggling to hit developmental landmarks to create brain change.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. But so I'm hoping to go deeper in that direction. I'm already starting to work with families in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai and maybe in Vietnam starting soon. So that's interesting to me. And I love the idea of being a resource in that way for families to learn how they can support their kid. And I mean, visions for the future. Yeah, I mean, I'm not ambitious, right? Again, what's important to me is that I'm living in alignment with my true self, with what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is happening, then I may not have the best retirement plan ever. But at least I'm not making myself sick at this point in my life because I'm not living authentically.
Okay. I want to be mindful of our time. So I want to thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to wrap up our conversation with I usually have like 2, 3 questions, but you answered most of them. So I'm like, because we asked, it's usually like grounding, which you answered earlier. So I'm going to leave you with this one, which is, well, I'll leave you with 2. So, what would you tell your younger self what you know now? Um, and if that's not kind of what, if that question doesn't really resonate, another way I kind of phrase it is like, for those who are listening to your story and this episode and really resonate with it, what recommendations would you give to them? So that's one question. And then my last one is, what resources have helped you on your journey over the years that you would recommend to people you encounter? So that could be books that you've read over and over again that you always go back to, that you would recommend to someone, or a mentor of yours that you would suggest them to start with, or a podcast, or an activity, or some sort of, even a simple movement, that you always go back to, even if it's like a 1-minute movement you could do. So those are my last 2 questions for you.
Well, to speak to my younger self or to people that are, kind of feeling the first sparks of needing to make some sort of life change, I think the first thing is to be aware of how hard you're being on yourself, and to consider whose voice that is and what that voice feels like inside of you. Because I think so much of our limitations in life, we just, there's self limitations, and it feels awful in our body, and we learn how to not feel it. But I think you can learn how to feel it very specifically. I think that could be helpful. And people used to say to me, for example, people used to say to me, oh, you're so brave. Oh, you're just leaving. You're just, starting a new life in a different continent. Oh, you're so brave. I don't think it has anything at all to do with bravery. I don't think you need to be a certain kind of person. It does require a certain amount of privilege, that's for sure. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the privilege that you have. Even some people have shame around their privilege. I think it's really important to acknowledge it and to be as generous with yourself and with other people in it. And know that if you are clear, if you have that self-love, or you're in the process of developing that self-love, and you are clear about your intention, you're aware of how you're hard on yourself, no stories just start at the beginning of the story. You just take one step at a time. You just follow the first thing. And if you're open and if you're clear, the next thing happens. And if you're open, you're clear, the next thing happens. And that's how it goes. And then the second question, and really relates into the first, is find a good teacher. I wouldn't recommend a book or a podcast or a teacher because it's personal. Don't follow someone else's book or teacher or podcast. Find your own, man. Do the work. Try the thing and find out. You're gonna know because you'll feel it. Oh yeah, that feels right. That person, that voice, that impression, that works for me.
Mm. Oh, I've done so many interviews, and that's the first time someone said that. And I really, really like that you put it out there that way, because it's so true. Because, even, I think those who, follow Curito or knows me know that, I do have a Rolodex, right? So, I mean, yes, I can recommend, but it's like, I think also, you need to feel for yourself. And I think I always tend to tell people, like, yeah, I can recommend, or I try to ask a lot of questions because I want to know what your intentions are so I can match make you with the right person or the right, lineage or the right modality. But even to be able to answer those questions, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's like, well, what are your intentions? Right? Can you answer that? So all of this, and to your point, is embodied authenticity. It's like it's all intertwined. So I appreciate that you put it out there in that limelight, because I think it's really important. And I think I want to add on to that by saying that it's okay if you find someone that resonates with you and you stick to it for a few years, and then suddenly you feel like, oh, well, I think I learned everything I needed to learn here, or I got exposed to something else that I'm actually more drawn to now. So I'm going to break up with this lineage or break up with this, school of thought, etc., and then shift into a different path. And that's okay too, right? Because I think oftentimes we, to your point earlier, our mindset gets so fixated in the like, but I'm, I don't know, I'm just going to use this as an example, but like, I'm an Ashtangi, right? I do Ashtanga yoga, and so I'm not going to do Iyengar, or, I mean, this is just a very, very, basic example, but or it could be anything else too, right? Like it's I'm a hip hop dancer, I would never do salsa, or whatever. But so I think it's just being open-minded to the fact that we're constantly evolving and constantly changing, and if we really look into our intentions, that and it being intuitive, that will guide you in where you need to head towards in this lifetime. So I want to thank you for bringing that up. So I don't know, is there anything else you would like to leave this conversation to tell our listeners? If not, I'm going to put all the resources in the episode resource guide below for people to, get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more. So your website, your social media, which, as you mentioned earlier, you're not very much on it because everyone's doing their practice. But yeah, or if you have other links you want me to add on to that below for people to, kind of have their first step if they're curious about your work and Feldenkrais and Somatic Movement Project.
Sounds great. I have a YouTube channel called Feldenkrais with Tara, and it has some audio lessons there that could be a I don't there's a lot of lessons out there, but that could be a good place to start to check out what Feldenkrais is
Okay.
about.
Sounds good. Okay, Tara, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.